In a highly successful company, a determined leader believed that only hard work brought rewards, but a small detail in one of her employees caught her eye. Driven by curiosity, she decided to follow him and witnessed something that changed her view forever. What she discovered transformed not only her company, but also her own humanity. Before you hear this powerful story, make sure to share it with someone who needs to hear this inspiring message. The automatic doors of St. Vincent Hospital opened with a soft hum as Michael Anderson walked through the main lobby. Wearing an impeccable Italian suit and polished shoes, he walked with the confidence characteristic of the Andersons, a family that had commanded the country's largest private hospital complex for 3 generations. His decisive steps echoed on the marble floor, while employees and patients observed him with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. That Monday morning, something unusual caught his attention: a heated discussion in the emergency line. An elegantly dressed woman was yelling at a young woman wearing a simple housekeeping uniform. The employee, visibly debilitated, was holding her abdomen and showing a worrying paleness. "Please, the pain is unbearable," pleaded the young woman, identified by her badge as Helen Sanders. Her voice trembled while beads of sweat ran down her forehead. "People have been waiting for hours here. Who does she think she is to cut the line?" shouted the woman, gesturing dramatically. Some patients in line began to murmur in agreement. "She probably doesn't even have health insurance," someone at the back of the line mocked, provoking disdainful laughter. Michael felt his jaw tighten. If there was something he detested more than incompetence, it was gratuitous cruelty. Without hesitation, he altered his route toward the commotion. His firm steps gradually silenced the raised voices. "Miss Sanders," he called, surprising everyone by knowing the housekeeper's name. In fact, Michael made a point of memorizing the names of all employees, regardless of their position. It was one of the most valuable teachings his grandfather had left him. The young woman raised her eyes, surprised to hear her name being pronounced by that deep and authoritative voice. Before she could respond, a new wave of pain made her double over, and Michael quickly supported her. "Come with me," he ordered, gently guiding her by the arm toward the treatment area. The elegant woman stepped forward, indignant. "But this is outrageous. We've been waiting for—" Michael turned slowly, his green eyes fixed on the woman with an intensity that made her instinctively step back. "This hospital belongs to my family, ma'am. Any other objections?" The silence was immediate and absolute. As they walked to the emergency area, Michael noticed how Helen trembled, not only from pain but also from embarrassment over the situation. "I don't need charity, Mr. Anderson," she murmured, trying to maintain her dignity. "This isn't charity, it's justice," he responded firmly. "And you can call me Michael." His phone vibrated insistently in his pocket. It was a message from his father. "Board meeting in 15 minutes. Merger with Palmer Laboratories. Don't be late." Michael looked at the screen for a few seconds before putting the phone back in his pocket. For the first time in his professional life, he chose to ignore a direct summons from his father. There was something more important to resolve at that moment. "Dr. Mitchell," he called, signaling to a passing doctor. "I need you to examine Miss Sanders immediately. I suspect appendicitis." The doctor, who was about to protest about the order of treatments, changed his mind upon recognizing Michael. "Of course, Mr. Anderson. This way, ma'am." As Helen was led to the examination room, Michael remained in the waiting room, ignoring the various calls his cell phone was receiving. Something about the whole situation bothered him deeply. It wasn't just the housekeeper's health condition, but the entire system that allowed the hospital's own employees to be treated with such disregard. 40 minutes later, Dr. Mitchell returned with a grave expression. "Your suspicion was correct, Mr. Anderson. It's appendicitis and it's in an advanced state. We need to operate immediately." "Do what's necessary," ordered Michael, already signing the authorization for hospitalization. "I want her in the best available room after surgery." "But sir," began the doctor hesitantly, "she doesn't have health insurance and—" "Doctor," interrupted Michael, his voice calm but firm, "did you hear what I said?" The doctor quickly nodded and withdrew to prepare for surgery. Michael finally checked his phone. 15 missed calls from his father, 8 messages from the board, and an urgent email about the $1 million merger being discussed at that exact moment. But as he watched Helen being taken to surgery, something inside him changed. Years of training to take over the Anderson Hospital empire hadn't prepared him for that moment of clarity. His family's hospital had become a money-making machine, forgetting its true mission, caring for people. His phone vibrated once more. It was his father. "Where are you? You just missed the most important vote of the year." Michael typed a simple response. "I'm exactly where I need to be. We'll talk later." He didn't know it yet. But that seemingly ordinary morning was about to trigger a revolution in the country's private healthcare system, and it all began because he chose to stop and listen to a housekeeper's cry for help. The boardroom of St. Vincent Hospital emanated tension when Michael finally arrived, 3 hours after the scheduled meeting's start. The aroma of coffee was now mixed with the palpable frustration of executives who remained seated around the massive mahogany table. His father, Richard Anderson, stood by the panoramic window, observing the city with his hands crossed behind his back. $50 million, said Richard without turning around. "That was the value of the merger that you just put at risk." Michael adjusted his tie and sat in his usual chair. "Dad, I can explain." "Explain?" Richard turned abruptly, his eyes flashing. "You missed the most important vote of the year to accompany a cleaning lady. The representatives from Palmer Laboratories waited for 2 hours. It was a medical emergency," responded Michael, keeping his voice controlled. "If she had waited in line, the consequences could have been serious." "And since when does the hospital Heir personally attend emergency cases?" questioned Douglas Martinez, one of the oldest directors. "We have an entire team of doctors for that." Michael breathed deeply before responding. "You weren't there. Did you see how our own employees are treated? How people without health insurance are humiliated in line?" "This hospital is not a charity institution," retorted Richard, slamming his hand on the table. "We're a business, Michael. A business that needs to generate profit to continue operating. And what kind of business are we when we ignore the suffering of the people who work for us?" Michael stood up, facing his father's gaze. "Helen has worked here for 5 years. She cleans the corridors of this very floor every day, and none of you even knew her name until today." An uncomfortable silence took over the room. Richard walked to his chair at the head of the table, sitting down heavily. "Son," he began with a softer tone, "I understand your concern, but you need to see the bigger picture. The merger with Palmer would allow us to expand, create new beds, hire more doctors." "To serve whom?" interrupted Michael. "Only those who can pay for the most expensive plans? Meanwhile, our own employees have to beg for treatment." At that moment, the door to the room opened, and Sandra, the executive secretary, entered hurriedly. "Mr. Richard, the representatives from Palmer Laboratories are on the line. They want an answer about the merger by the end of the day." Richard looked at his son, expecting some sign of backing down, but Michael remained firm. "I have a counter-proposal," said Michael, surprising everyone. "What if we used part of the merger value to create a medical assistance program for low-income employees?" Nervous laughter from the directors echoed through the room. "You're joking, right?" asked Martinez, adjusting his glasses. "I've never been more serious," replied Michael, walking to the room's whiteboard. He began writing numbers and projections. "If we redirect 15% of the merger value, we can create a specific fund for treating employees and their direct family members. This would not only improve our team's quality of life, but would also increase productivity and reduce absenteeism." Richard observed his son with a mixture of irritation and curiosity. "And you think Palmer would accept a reduction in the merger value?" "If we present it as a social responsibility project, yes," responded Michael, continuing his calculations. "Think of the positive publicity, the strengthening of the brand. We would be the first major hospital to create a program of this size." The directors began to whisper among themselves, some already taking notes. Richard stood up again, approaching his son. "Do you realize the risk you're proposing?" he asked in a low voice. "I do," replied Michael, turning to face his father. "And I'm willing to take full responsibility." If the program fails, I'll resign from my position on the board. A murmur ran through the room. Richard studied his son's face for long seconds before speaking. You would risk your inheritance for this? To do what's right? Yes, replied Michael, without hesitation. Richard returned to his chair, thoughtful. After a few moments that seemed like an eternity, he addressed the secretary. Sandra, schedule a new meeting with the Palmer representatives for tomorrow. Tell them we have a different proposal to discuss. As the directors began to disperse, Michael was organizing his papers when his father approached him again. How is the employee? Asked Richard, surprising his son. Helen. She's in recovery. The surgery was a success. Richard nodded slowly. You know, your grandfather used to say that a hospital is more than walls and equipment. It's a place where lives are transformed. He paused before continuing. Perhaps I've forgotten that in recent years. Michael watched his father walk to the door, stopping before leaving. Oh, and son, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. Prepare a complete presentation for tomorrow. I want all the numbers, projections, and social impacts. Alone in the boardroom, Michael allowed himself a small smile. He took out his cell phone and typed a message to the head nurse. How is patient Helen Sanders? The response came quickly. Awake and asking when she can return to work. Oh, and insisting that she can't pay for the treatment. Tell her not to worry about that, replied Michael. Things are going to change around here. Putting away his phone, he began working on his presentation. The day had begun with a simple decision to help someone in need, and now it was about to transform the entire system. As he organized his ideas, Michael couldn't help but think about Helen and how many other people like her needed help. Night was already falling over the city when he finally finished the initial outline of the program. Looking out the office window, Michael realized that, for the first time in a long time, he felt truly proud to be an Anderson. The next morning dawned with a different energy at St. Vincent Hospital. The normally quiet corridors of the administrative sector were buzzing with rumors about the previous day's meeting and Michael Anderson's mysterious absence during the crucial negotiation with Palmer Laboratories. Michael arrived early, carrying a folder full of documents and charts he had prepared during the night. His tired eyes betrayed his sleepless night, but there was a renewed determination in his steps. Before heading to the meeting room, he made a detour to the room where Helen Sanders was recovering. Upon entering, he found Helen sitting on the bed, absently flipping through a magazine. Her face lit up when she saw Michael, but soon her expression changed to concern. Mr. Anderson, I don't know how to thank you, but I also don't know how I'm going to pay for all this, she began, her voice trembling. Michael raised his hand, gently interrupting her. Please, Helen, don't worry about that now. Your health is what's most important. He pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. How are you feeling? Much better, thank you, she replied, still hesitant. But Mr. Anderson. Michael, he corrected with a smile. Michael, she continued, I need to be honest. I have no way to cover the expenses of a private room, much less emergency surgery. Michael leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Helen's eyes. Helen, what happened to you shouldn't have happened. No employee of this hospital should go through what you went through. And that's why I'm here so early. Today we're going to propose significant changes in the way we care for our employees. Helen looked at him, confused. I don't understand. I can't go into details yet, but I promise that soon you and all the other employees will have access to dignified care without having to worry about costs or endless lines. Before Helen could respond, a nurse entered the room. Excuse me, Mr. Anderson. Your father is asking for you in the meeting room. Michael stood up, giving Helen one last reassuring smile. Rest and recover. I'll come back to talk more later. When he arrived at the meeting room, Michael found not only his father and the hospital directors, but also the representatives from Palmer Laboratories. The tension in the air was palpable. Richard Anderson opened the meeting with his usual formality. Gentlemen, thank you for your presence. As you know, yesterday we had a setback in our negotiation. My son, Michael, has an alternative proposal that he would like to present. All attention turned to Michael, who stood up and walked to the front of the room. Taking a deep breath, he began. Ladies and gentlemen, St. Vincent Hospital has always prided itself on being a leader in medical innovation. Today, I propose that we be pioneers in another area, corporate social responsibility in healthcare. For almost an hour, Michael presented his detailed plan. Charts, financial projections, and social impact studies followed one after another in the slides. He talked about the medical assistance program for low-income employees, explained how part of the merger value would be redirected to this fund, and demonstrated the long-term benefits not only for employees, but for the hospital's reputation and efficiency. When he finished, a momentary silence took over the room. It was Charles Palmer, CEO of Palmer Laboratories, who broke it. "Mr. Anderson, Michael," he began, adjusting his glasses, "I must admit that when I was informed about an alternative proposal, I was skeptical. But this is revolutionary." Richard looked at his son with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "Michael, the numbers are impressive, but the risk of doing nothing is greater," interrupted Michael. "How many of our employees postpone treatments because they can't afford them? How many come to work sick, putting themselves and patients at risk?" Charles Palmer stood up, walking to the window. "You know, when my father founded Palmer Laboratories, he had a motto: science in service of humanity. Over time, I fear we've strayed a bit from that ideal." He turned, facing the room. "This proposal not only maintains the spirit of our original merger, but elevates it to a new level." The hospital directors began to murmur among themselves, some still skeptical, others already visibly excited about the idea. Richard Anderson stood up, silencing everyone. "Gentlemen, I believe we have a decision to make. Let's proceed to a vote." The next hours were intense. Debate after debate, Michael passionately defended his proposal with concrete data. In the end, when the last vote was counted, the result was clear. The program would be implemented. While the executives congratulated each other and contracts began to be drafted, Michael escaped from the room for a moment. He needed fresh air and a minute to absorb what had just happened. In the hallway, he found Sandra, the executive secretary, who was looking at him with admiration. "Mr. Michael, what you did, it's incredible." Michael smiled, but before he could respond, he noticed something strange. Sandra seemed pale, and her hands were trembling slightly. "Sandra, are you okay?" She hesitated for a moment. "Actually, there's something I need to tell you. Something about me, and about Helen Sanders." Michael frowned, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Sandra looked around, making sure they were alone. "Helen isn't just any employee to me. She's my sister." The Maid revelation hit Michael like lightning. Suddenly, many things began to make sense. Sandra's nervousness during the meeting, her unusual interest in Helen's case. "But how? Why did you never mention this?" Sandra lowered her eyes, visibly emotional. "It's a long story, Mr. Michael. A story of sacrifices, secrets, and shame." At that moment, Michael realized that what he had initiated was much bigger than a simple medical assistance program. It was the beginning of a journey that would reveal painful truths and test the limits of compassion and ethics in the healthcare business world. "Sandra," he said, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder, "I think we need to talk. And afterward, if you'll allow, I'd like to hear this story from both of you." As he returned to the meeting room, Michael knew that the real challenges were just beginning, but for the first time in a long time, he felt he was on the right. Michael Anderson's office on the top floor of St. Vincent Hospital had always been a sanctuary of order and efficiency. That afternoon, however, the environment reflected the whirlwind of emotions and revelations of the past 24 hours. Scattered files, a half-empty water bottle, and a cold coffee cup silently testified to the young executive's agitation. Seated before him, Sarah and Helen exchanged nervous glances. The silence was heavy, laden with secrets about to be revealed. Michael observed them, trying to reconcile the image of the efficient executive secretary with that of the dedicated housekeeper, looking for traces of similarity between the sisters, who until a few hours ago pretended to be mere acquaintances. "Ladies," began Michael, breaking the silence, "thank you for agreeing to talk with me. I confess that I'm intrigued by your situation. Sarah adjusted herself in the chair, taking the initiative. Mr. Michael, before anything, I want to apologize for not having been completely honest all these years. I know that the company policy... Michael raised his hand, gently interrupting her. Sarah, we're not here for judgments or reprimands. I want to understand your story and how we got to this point. Helen, still pale from her recent surgery, looked at her older sister with a mixture of concern and encouragement. Sarah took a deep breath and began. Our story begins 15 years ago, in a small town upstate. We were a simple but happy family. Our parents worked hard to give us the best they could. I was about to start college when, her voice faltered for a moment, when our parents suffered a serious car accident. Michael leaned forward, his expression softening with empathy. I'm sorry, he murmured. Sarah continued, Suddenly I found myself responsible for Helen, who was only 12 years old. I abandoned my college dreams and took several jobs to support us. It was a difficult time, but we promised each other that no matter what happened, we would remain united. Helen took her sister's hand, giving it a comforting squeeze. Sarah sacrificed everything for me, she said, looking at Michael. She worked 3 different jobs so I could finish school. Over time, continued Sarah, I secured a position as an administrative assistant here at the hospital. It was an opportunity that changed our lives. I was finally able to offer some stability for Helen. Michael frowned, connecting the dots. But why keep it a secret that you were sisters? Sarah lowered her eyes, visibly uncomfortable. When I was promoted to executive secretary, I discovered there was an unwritten policy against nepotism. Close relatives couldn't work in the same sector or have positions that could influence each other. I needed the job, intervened Helen. We had no one else, and Sarah didn't want me to abandon my studies, so you decided to pretend you didn't know each other, concluded Michael, understanding dawning in his eyes. Sarah nodded, tears shining in her eyes. It was the hardest decision we've ever made. Walking through the corridors pretending to be strangers, not being able to have lunch together, having to invent separate lives for colleagues. It was painful, but it seemed like our only option. Michael stood up, walking to the window. The city stretched below, thousands of lives intertwined in an invisible web of stories and secrets. He turned to the sisters, his expression a mixture of compassion and determination. What you did, he said calmly, was motivated by love and necessity. I can't condemn you for that. In fact, it only reinforces my conviction that our system needs profound changes. Helen looked at him, hope shining in her eyes. What does this mean for us, Mr. Anderson? Michael returned to his chair, leaning over the desk. It means we're going to review this nepotism policy. It doesn't make sense to punish dedicated people just because they're family. What matters is competence and commitment to work, and you two have demonstrated that in abundance. Sarah let out a sigh of relief, years of tension seeming to leave her shoulders. Mr. Michael, you don't know what this means to us. Actually, I think I do, he replied with a gentle smile. And please, it's just Michael. I think after all this we can treat each other with less formality. At that moment, a knock on the door interrupted the conversation. It was Richard Anderson, Michael's father, who entered with a serious expression. Son, we need to talk about... Oh, excuse me, I didn't know you were in a meeting. He stopped, noticing Sarah and Helen. Michael stood up. Dad, I'm glad you're here. Let me introduce Sarah and Helen. They have an incredible story that reinforces exactly why our new program is so necessary. Richard looked curiously at the 2 women and then back at his son. Well, this sounds interesting. Perhaps we should continue this conversation over dinner. I have a feeling there's much more to be discussed. Michael nodded, realizing this could be a crucial moment to gain his father's full support for the changes he was proposing. As they prepared to leave, Michael couldn't help but think about how many other stories like Sarah and Helen's existed within the hospital. Stories of sacrifice, love, and resilience that remained hidden out of fear or necessity. The dinner that would follow wasn't just a meal, but the beginning of a transformation. A transformation not only in the hospital's policies but in the very culture of the institution. Michael knew the path would be challenging, but looking at Sarah and Helen, he was certain it was worth fighting for this change. As they left the office, Michael made a silent promise to himself. He would make St. Vincent Hospital not just a place of healing for patients, but a home for all who dedicated their lives to caring for others. The revolution he had initiated was just beginning, and he could hardly wait to see where it would lead them. The Bella Vista restaurant, atop one of the city's most elegant skyscrapers, offered a stunning panoramic view. But that night, the eyes of the 5 occupants of the reserved table, in the most discreet corner of the establishment, were fixed on each other, ignoring the spectacle of the illuminated metropolis outside. Michael Anderson, his father Richard, Sarah, Helen, and, surprisingly, Charles Palmer of Palmer Laboratories formed an unusual group. The maitre d', accustomed to discretion, had accommodated them in a more reserved area, sensing the importance of the meeting. Richard Anderson, patriarch of the family and still chairman of the board of St. Vincent Hospital, broke the initial silence. "Well, Michael, you certainly know how to shake things up. In less than 48 hours, you've challenged a multi-million-dollar merger, proposed a revolutionary assistance program for employees, and now you present us with a story that, frankly, seems straight out of a novel." Sarah and Helen shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, but Michael remained firm. "Dad, it's exactly because of stories like Sarah and Helen's that we need these changes. How many of our employees are going through similar difficulties without our knowledge?" Charles Palmer, who had been observing silently until then, leaned forward. "I must confess, young Anderson, that your proposal intrigued me from the start. But hearing this story, well, that gives a human dimension that numbers on paper can't capture." Richard looked at Palmer with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. "Charles, don't tell me you're completely convinced. The reduction in the merger value—" "Richard, my friend," interrupted Palmer, "over the years I've learned that a company's true value isn't just in its numbers, but in its impact on people's lives. What your son proposes is bold, yes, but also visionary." Helen, who had remained silent until then, gathered courage to speak. "Mr. Anderson, Richard, I know that to you I'm just a housekeeper, but I can assure you that every employee in that hospital, from the humblest to the most senior, gives their best every day. All we ask for is the chance to take care of our health without fear of losing our jobs or falling into unpayable debt." The silence that followed was broken by the soft sound of silverware against porcelain as waiters served the appetizer. Richard observed his plate for a moment before speaking. "Michael, do you remember what your grandfather used to say about the hospital?" Michael nodded, recalling, "That a hospital is more than walls and equipment. It's a place where lives are transformed." "Exactly," said Richard, a nostalgic gleam in his eyes. "In recent years, I fear I've strayed from that vision. I became so focused on numbers and expansions that, well, maybe I lost sight of what really matters." Sarah, sensing an opening, decided to risk, "Mr. Anderson, if I may, I've worked at the hospital for years and I see the potential we have. With the program Michael proposes, we could not only improve employees' lives, but also significantly increase the quality of care for patients." Charles Palmer clapped softly. "Well said, my young lady. And that's exactly why I'm willing to support this project. Imagine the impact we could have if other hospitals and companies followed our example." Michael felt a wave of optimism. Things seemed to be heading in the right direction. However, his father still didn't appear fully convinced. "All this sounds wonderful in theory," said Richard, "but the reality of business is relentless. How do we ensure this won't compromise the hospital's financial stability in the long term?" It was at this moment that Michael realized it was time to reveal the ace he had up his sleeve. He opened his folder and pulled out a set of documents. "Dad, in the last 24 hours I haven't just been dreaming. I've worked on detailed projections considering various scenarios." He passed the papers to Richard. "These numbers show that, with some resource reallocation and process optimization, we can implement the program without significantly compromising our profit margin. In fact, in the long term, we might even see an increase in productivity and..." A reduction in costs related to absenteeism and staff turnover. Richard examined the documents carefully, his face a mask of concentration. After a few minutes that seemed like an eternity, he looked at his son. "Michael, this is impressive. You've really done your homework." Charles Palmer smiled, raising his glass in a toast. "To the new generation of Andersons. It seems the future of St. Vincent Hospital is in good hands." As everyone joined the toast, Michael felt a mixture of relief and determination. The battle wasn't completely won, but he had achieved something crucial, opening the eyes and heart of his father and one of the hospital's most important partners. The rest of the evening proceeded in a lighter atmosphere, with animated discussions about the program's details and shared stories. Sarah and Helen, initially tense, began to open up, offering valuable insights about employees' real needs. At the end of the night, as they were saying goodbye, Richard pulled Michael aside. "Son, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not just for your vision, but for your determination to do what's right. Your grandfather would have loved to see this." Michael felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot to me." "But remember," continued Richard, his tone becoming more serious, "not everyone on the board will be so easily convinced. You have a fight ahead of you." Michael nodded, aware of the challenges that awaited him. "I'm ready for it, Dad. With you by my side, I know we can make a difference." As Michael watched his father walk away, he knew that night marked not only the beginning of a new era for St. Vincent Hospital, but also a profound change in his relationship with Richard. The distance that had formed between them over the years was beginning to dissipate, replaced by mutual respect and a shared vision of the future. The taxi carrying Sarah and Helen home passed by them, and the sisters waved animatedly from the window. Michael smiled, remembering the reason he had started all this. It was for people like them, and for thousands of others whose stories he didn't yet know, that he was willing to fight. Looking at the city's starry sky, Michael made a silent promise to himself. No matter how difficult the path ahead might be, he wouldn't give up. St. Vincent Hospital would be a beacon of hope and care for everyone, patients and employees alike, and he would do everything in his power to make that dream a reality. The sun had barely risen when Michael Anderson arrived at St. Vincent Hospital that morning. The imposing building, which had always seemed to him a fortress of efficiency and order, now revealed itself as a battlefield for the changes he was proposing. As he entered the main lobby, Michael noticed curious looks and whispers from employees. News about the new employee assistance program had spread quickly, creating a mixture of hope and apprehension in the air. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," greeted Mrs. Zelda, the receptionist who had worked at the hospital for more than 3 decades. Her warm smile contrasted with the deep circles under her eyes. "Good morning, Mrs. Zelda," replied Michael, stopping for a moment. "How are you feeling today?" The question took the woman by surprise. It wasn't common for executives to be interested in the well-being of lower-ranking employees. "Oh, I'm fine, thank you. Just a bit tired. My grandson has been sick and—" "Why?" "Don't you stop by the clinic later?" suggested Michael gently. "I heard Dr. Camilla is on duty today. She's excellent." Mrs. Zelda's eyes widened. "But I don't have insurance, sir, and my shift—" "Don't worry about that," Michael smiled. "I'll talk to your supervisor. Your health is important to us." As he walked away, Michael could feel the surprised and hopeful looks of the employees who had witnessed the scene. It was a small gesture, but he knew it was the beginning of something bigger. Upon reaching his office, Michael found Sarah already at her post, organizing a pile of documents. "Good morning, Michael," she said, a slight smile on her lips. Since the revelation about her relationship with Helen, Sarah seemed more relaxed, as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "The board has scheduled an extraordinary meeting for this afternoon. It seems not everyone is happy with the proposed changes." Michael nodded, already expecting this resistance. "Who's leading the opposition?" "Dr. Mitchell and Mrs. Oliveira seem to be the most vocal," replied Sarah, handing him a report. "They argue that the program is financially irresponsible and goes against the hospital's corporate culture." "Corporate culture," Michael muttered, flipping through the report. as if denying basic care to our own employees was something to be proud of. At that moment, his phone rang. It was Helen. "Michael, sorry to bother you, but something's happening in the cleaning sector." Intrigued, Michael went down to the hospital basement, where he found a group of cleaning staff gathered, animatedly, discussing. "What's going on here?" he asked, approaching. Carl, one of the oldest employees, stepped forward. "Mr. Anderson, we heard about the new program. Is it true we'll have access to medical treatments at no cost?" Michael realized it was a crucial moment. "Yes, Carl. We're implementing a comprehensive healthcare program for all employees, regardless of their position." A murmur of excitement ran through the group. "But why?" asked a young employee, her voice trembling with emotion. "Why now?" Michael looked at each of them before answering. "Because you are the heart of this hospital. Without you, none of this would work. It's time we recognize that not just with words, but with concrete actions." The reactions were immediate. Some employees cried with relief, others hugged, and there was even applause. Michael felt a wave of emotion hit him. This, he thought, is the true purpose of a hospital. Back in his office, Michael was preparing for the board meeting when his father entered. "Son," began Richard, his tone serious, "the hospital is buzzing with rumors. Some board members are concerned that you're acting precipitously." Michael faced his father. "And you, Dad, what do you think?" Richard sighed, sitting down. "I think you're doing the right thing, but I also think you need to be cautious. Changes that are too rapid can destabilize the entire structure we've built over the years." "I understand your concern," replied Michael, "but each day we spend without acting is a day we're failing our employees and, by extension, our patients." The board meeting was tense, as expected. Dr. Mitchell, medical director, was the first to speak up. "This is madness," he exclaimed. "We can't simply open the hospital doors to all employees and their families. Where will we stop?" Mrs. Oliveira, financial director, agreed. "The costs will be astronomical. This will erode our profit margin and put future projects at risk." Michael listened patiently before responding. "Ladies and gentlemen, I understand your concerns, but I ask you to consider this. A healthy employee without financial worries related to health is a more productive and loyal employee." He then presented the numbers he had prepared, showing how in the long term, the program could even reduce costs and increase efficiency. "Furthermore," he continued, "think about the message we're sending. We're not just another corporate hospital. We're an institution that truly cares about everyone's well-being." Charles Palmer, who was participating in the meeting as a new partner, intervened. "I must say I agree with young Anderson. This program is not only ethical, but also smart from a business perspective. Imagine the impact on our reputation." The discussion extended for hours. Arguments were raised, numbers were questioned, and emotions occasionally ran high. But in the end, Michael's proposal was approved, albeit with some modifications and the condition of a quarterly review of the results. When the meeting finally ended, Michael found himself exhausted, but euphoric. In the hallway, he was approached by Dr. Mitchell. "I hope you know what you're doing, young man," said the doctor, his voice a mixture of admiration and concern. "You've just embarked on a journey of no return." Michael nodded, understanding the weight of those words. "Doctor, I believe this is the journey we should have always taken." At the end of that day, as the sun set over the city, Michael observed the hospital's movement from his office window. Employees came and went, patients were admitted and discharged. The constant dance of life and healing continued. He knew the challenges were just beginning. Implementing the program, dealing with expectations, balancing financial demands with human needs, all this awaited him. But for the first time in a long time, Michael felt he was on the right path. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Helen bringing a cup of coffee. "I thought you might need this," she smiled, placing the cup on the desk. "I heard it was quite a day." Michael returned the smile, grateful for the kindness. "Thank you, Helen, and yes, it was just the beginning." As Helen withdrew, Michael reflected on how a simple decision to help someone had triggered a wave of changes that would now affect thousands of lives. St. Vincent Hospital would never be the same, and he was determined to ensure it would be for the better. 3 months had passed since the implementation of the Employee Assistance Program at St. Vincent Hospital. What began as a wave of optimism now faced its first major test of fire. Michael Anderson sat in his office, staring at a pile of reports that seemed to scream bad news. Sarah entered, carrying another folder. "Michael, the numbers for the last quarter have arrived." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Let me guess, they're not good." "Expenses are 30% above forecast," confirmed Sarah hesitantly. "And there are complications." "What kind of complications?" Before Sarah could answer, Dr. Mitchell burst through the door, his face red with frustration. "Anderson, this is a disaster. The emergency department is overloaded. We have employees abusing the system, and the quality of care for regular patients is dropping." Michael stood up, trying to stay calm. "Dr. Mitchell, let's discuss this calmly. What exactly are the problems?" The doctor threw a report on the desk. "See for yourself. We have a 50% increase in emergency consultations, many of them for non-urgent issues. Employees are bringing distant relatives claiming their dependents, and some of our best doctors are threatening to leave because the workload has doubled." Michael leafed through the report, his heart sinking with each page. The news was worse than he had imagined. "That's not all," added Sarah softly. "Some investors are nervous. The hospital's stock has fallen 15% since the program's announcement." Michael sat down heavily, the reality of the situation hitting him like a punch to the stomach. He had anticipated challenges, but not on this scale. "The board is demanding an emergency meeting," continued Dr. Mitchell. "Many want to cancel the program. Immediately." At that moment, Helen entered the office hurriedly. "Michael, sorry to interrupt, but there's something you need to see." Intrigued and concerned, Michael followed Helen to the hospital's main lobby. What he saw left him speechless. Dozens of employees were gathered, holding improvised signs. "Don't cancel the program. Health is a right. St. Vincent cares." Among them, Michael recognized faces from all areas of the hospital: nurses, cleaning staff, lab technicians, even some resident doctors. Mrs. Zelda, the receptionist, approached Michael. "Mr. Anderson, we heard rumors that they want to end the program. Please don't let that happen. My grandson, he's finally getting the treatment he needs." Michael looked around, seeing hope and fear in the eyes of his employees. He realized that what was at stake was much greater than numbers in a report. Back in the office, Michael found his father waiting for him. "Son," began Richard, his tone grave, "the situation is serious. The board is furious, investors are scared, and costs are out of control." Michael prepared to defend the program, but Richard raised his hand, interrupting him. "But," continued his father, "I also saw what's happening down there. I saw the real impact this program is having on people's lives." Michael looked at his father, surprised. Richard smiled slightly. "Don't look at me like that. I may be a stubborn old man, but I still know how to recognize when something important is happening." He paused. "What do you intend to do?" Michael breathed deeply, organizing his thoughts. "We can't simply cancel the program. That would destroy the trust we've built. But it's also clear that we need adjustments." He turned to Dr. Mitchell and Sarah. "We need an immediate action plan. Dr. Mitchell, I want a dedicated team to evaluate and prioritize emergency cases. We'll educate our employees about the appropriate use of services. Sarah," he continued, "I need a complete audit of all beneficiaries. We'll establish clear criteria for dependents and create a co-payment system for non-urgent cases." He then turned to his father. "And we need to be transparent. Let's schedule a meeting with all employees. We'll explain the situation, the challenges we face, and how we plan to solve them. We'll show that we're committed to the program, but that we need everyone's cooperation to make it sustainable." Richard nodded, a gleam of pride in his eyes. "And the board?" "I'll prepare a detailed presentation," replied Michael. "We'll show the problems, yes, but also the successes. Stories like Mrs. Zelda's grandson, and we'll present our action plan to correct course." Dr. Mitchell, who had been listening attentively, spoke. "This won't be easy, Anderson. We're asking for a culture change, not just policy changes." "Exactly," agreed Michael. and that's why we need everyone's support. Dr. Mitchell, you are respected by the entire medical team. Your leadership will be crucial at this moment." The older doctor seemed surprised, but slowly nodded. "Very well, I'll do what I can." In the weeks that followed, St. Vincent Hospital experienced a true internal revolution. Daily meetings, training sessions, policy adjustments, and intensive communication with employees and patients became the new norm. Michael worked tirelessly, often sleeping in his office. He visited each department, listened to employees' concerns, and sought creative solutions for the challenges that arose. One night, while reviewing the latest numbers with Sarah, he noticed something interesting. "Sarah, look at this. Emergency. Consultations have decreased, but preventive consultations have significantly increased." Sarah examined the charts. "You're right. It seems people are starting to take better care of their health before problems become emergencies." Michael smiled, feeling a spark of hope. That's exactly what we wanted to see. Prevention is always better and cheaper than emergency treatment. When the day of the board meeting arrived, Michael was exhausted but determined. He entered the meeting room with a confidence that surprised even himself. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, 3 months ago, we embarked on an ambitious journey. We've faced challenges, made mistakes, but we've also seen miracles happen. For 2 hours, Michael presented data, charts, testimonials, and most importantly, a detailed plan for the future. He didn't hide the problems, but showed how they were being addressed and the first signs of improvement. At the end, a tense silence hung over the room. It was Charles Palmer who broke it. "Michael," he said, "when you proposed this program, I supported you because I believed it was the right thing to do. Now I see that it's also the smart thing to do. You have my full support to continue." One by one, the board members expressed their opinions. There were still concerns and reservations, but most recognized the progress and potential of the program. When the meeting ended, Richard approached his son. "You faced the storm head-on, Michael. I'm proud of you." Michael smiled, tired but satisfied. "Thank you, Dad, but the storm hasn't passed yet. We have a lot of work ahead." As he left the meeting room, Michael found Helen waiting in the hallway. "So?" she asked, anxious. "The program continues," he answered, "but the real work begins now." Helen smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "You know, Michael, when you helped me that day, I never imagined it would turn into something so big. You're changing lives." Michael felt a warmth in his chest, remembering why he had started all this. "We're changing lives, Helen. All of us. Together." As they walked down the hallway, Michael knew that the challenges were far from over. But now, more than ever, he was convinced they were on the right path. St. Vincent Hospital was transforming not just into a place of healing, but into a true home for all who worked and were treated there. The silent storm that had threatened to destroy everything had transformed into a wave of positive change, and Michael was determined to ride that wave to the end, no matter what the future held. The sun was rising over the city, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, when Michael Anderson entered St. Vincent Hospital. 6 months had passed since the implementation of the Employee Assistance Program, and the hospital pulsed with a different energy. In the main lobby, a new preventive care wing was being inaugurated. Employees of all levels mingled with patients, creating a community atmosphere that Michael had never seen before. "Good morning, Mr. Michael," greeted Mrs. Zelda, now coordinator of the Patient Welcome Program. Her smile was brighter than ever. "You won't believe what happened yesterday." Michael smiled, already expecting one of her inspiring stories. "What was it, Mrs. Zelda?" "Remember Mr. John, the security guard? He brought his wife in for a routine checkup, and they discovered a heart problem right at the beginning. The doctors said if they had waited a few more months—" She paused, emotional. "Well, thanks to the program, they caught it in time." Michael felt a lump in his throat. It was stories like that which kept him motivated, even on the most difficult days. Upon reaching his office, he found Sarah already working on a pile of reports. "Good morning, Michael," she smiled. "The numbers for the last quarter have arrived. I think you'll like to see this. Michael examined the documents, his eyes widening as he absorbed the information. Emergency expenses had fallen by 25%, while preventive consultations increased by 40%. Employee productivity showed a steady increase, and the satisfaction index for both patients and staff was at a historic high. "This is amazing, Sarah," exclaimed Michael. "It seems we're finally reaping the fruits of our work." Sarah nodded, but her smile faltered for a moment. "Yes, but there's something else you need to know." Before she could continue, Dr. Mitchell entered the office, followed closely by Helen. "Anderson," began the doctor, his expression serious, "we have a situation." Michael felt his stomach sink. "What happened?" Helen stepped forward. "It's my sister, Lucy. She has lupus. We just found out her case has worsened and she needs an experimental treatment." Michael remembered that Lucy was the reason Helen worked so hard. "But isn't she covered by our program?" Dr. Mitchell cleared his throat. "That's the problem. The treatment she needs is extremely expensive and isn't on the list of procedures approved by the program. If we make this exception, other employees might demand the same," completed Michael, understanding the gravity of the situation. Helen had tears in her eyes. "I know it's asking a lot, Michael, but without this treatment, Lucy, she doesn't have much time." The silence that followed was heavy. Michael felt the weight of all the lives that depended on his decisions. "How much would the treatment cost?" he finally asked. Sarah consulted some notes. "About $500,000. It's almost the entire contingency budget of the program for this quarter." Michael closed his eyes, thinking. He knew that any decision he made would have enormous repercussions. "Dr. Mitchell," he began slowly, "in your medical opinion, does this treatment have good chances of success?" The doctor hesitated. "It's experimental, Anderson, but the preliminary results are promising. If it works, it could not only save Lucy's life, but also pave the way for other patients with lupus." Michael stood up, walking to the window. He observed the movement of the hospital below, all those interconnected lives. "Sarah, call an emergency meeting of the board for this afternoon. Dr. Mitchell, I need a detailed report on this treatment and its implications. Helen," he turned to the young woman, "bring your sister here. I want to meet her personally." The hours that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Michael immersed himself in research about lupus and the proposed treatment, consulted specialists, and reviewed the program's policies dozens of times. When Lucy arrived, Michael was touched by her strength and determination, despite her evident physical fragility. The young woman spoke about her dreams, her fears, and her gratitude for the support she had already received from the hospital. "Mr. Anderson," said Lucy, her voice weak but firm, "I know I have no right to ask for more than I've already received, but if there's a chance, I want to live. I want to have the opportunity to give back all the good I've received." Michael felt his heart tighten. The decision he faced wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet, but about the future of a young woman full of potential. In the board meeting, the debate was heated. Some members argued that approving Lucy's treatment would open a dangerous precedent. Others defended that it was exactly for cases like this that the program had been created. "If we can't help when it really matters, what's the purpose of all this?" argued Charles Palmer, surprising everyone with his vehemence. Richard Anderson, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. "Michael, son, what do you propose?" Michael breathed deeply before speaking. "I propose that we approve Lucy's treatment, but not as an exception. Let's create a special fund for promising experimental treatments. Each case will be evaluated by a medical and ethical committee. It will be an investment not only in the lives of our employees, but in the advancement of medicine as a whole." He paused, looking at each board member. "Yes, this will require an increase in the program's budget, but think about the long-term return. Imagine if we discover a revolutionary treatment for lupus. The impact goes far beyond a single life saved." The silence that followed was broken by Richard. "I'm proud of you, son. You're not just managing a hospital, you're leading a healthcare revolution." He turned to the board. "I support the proposal. Who else is with me?" One by one, the board members expressed their support. Even those who had reservations recognized the vision and potential of what was being proposed. At the end of the meeting, Michael felt exhausted but deeply satisfied. He knew that the path ahead would be challenging, but he also knew they were doing the right thing. When he informed Helen and Lucy about the decision, the tears and hugs he received were all the confirmation he needed. That night, as he observed the city from the hospital's terrace, Michael reflected on the journey that had begun just over 6 months ago. What had started as an act of compassion for an employee had transformed into a systemic change that was redefining the role of a hospital in society. Sarah joined him, offering a cup of coffee. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Michael smiled. "I'm thinking about how a small stone can create ripples that spread across an entire lake. We're just at the beginning, Sarah. There's so much more to be done." As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of gold and purple, Michael felt a renewed determination. St. Vincent Hospital was no longer just a place of treatment. It was becoming a beacon of hope and innovation. And he was determined to keep that light shining, no matter what challenges the future might bring. Autumn arrived in the city, bringing with it a cool breeze and golden leaves that danced in the air. At St. Vincent Hospital, this change of season seemed to reflect the profound transformations occurring in its corridors and rooms. Michael Anderson walked through the new Center for Research and Advanced Treatments, inaugurated just 2 weeks ago. The space, once an underutilized wing of the hospital, now pulsed with the energy of scientists, doctors, and patients united by a common goal: finding cures for diseases considered untreatable. "Mr. Anderson," an animated voice called him. It was Lucy, Helen's sister, who had become not just a patient, but a true ambassador for the program. Michael smiled upon seeing her. The experimental treatment for lupus was showing promising results, and Lucy seemed stronger every day. "Good morning, Lucy. How are you feeling today?" "Better than ever," she replied, her eyes shining. "And that's not all. Look." She handed a paper to Michael. It was an invitation to an international conference on autoimmune diseases. Lucy had been invited to share her experience as a patient in the experimental treatment. "This is incredible, Lucy," exclaimed Michael, genuinely happy for her. "You're becoming a true spokesperson for hope." Lucy nodded, emotional. "All this was only possible because of the program you created, Michael. You didn't just save my life, but you're changing the future of thousands of people." As he continued his walk through the hospital, Michael reflected on the impact a single decision could have. What had begun as an employee assistance program had expanded far beyond the walls of St. Vincent. Upon reaching his office, he found Sarah and Dr. Mitchell waiting for him, both with expressions that mixed excitement and concern. "What happened?" asked Michael, feeling that something important was about to be revealed. Dr. Mitchell was the first to speak. "Michael, the preliminary results of Lucy's treatment and other patients with lupus, they're more than promising. We're seeing a remission rate that has never been documented before." Michael felt his heart accelerate. "That's incredible. But why do you seem concerned?" Sarah sighed, handing him a folder. "The news leaked. The press is in a frenzy, calling St. Vincent the miracle hospital. And this," she hesitated, "has attracted the attention of some powerful people." Michael opened the folder and his eyes widened. It was a purchase proposal for the hospital from an international healthcare conglomerate. The offered value was astronomical, more than double the market value of St. Vincent. "They want our research," murmured Michael, understanding the situation. "They want to patent the treatment and market it globally." Dr. Mitchell nodded gravely. "And they're not the only ones interested. We've received calls from hospitals around the world wanting partnerships, governments offering funding." "Michael, what we've created here is revolutionary." Michael leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. What had begun as a program to help employees now had the potential to change the global health landscape. "What are we going to do?" asked Sarah, her voice tense. Michael was silent for a moment, thoughtful. Finally, he stood up and walked to the window, observing the movement of the hospital below. "We're going to do the right thing," he said, his voice firm. "We won't sell. We won't patent the treatment for profit. We're going to share our research, openly and freely, with the world." Dr. Mitchell and Sarah exchanged surprised looks. "But Michael," began Dr. Mitchell, "the financial potential—" Michael turned to face them. "Money isn't the most important thing here. Think about how many lives we can save if we make this treatment accessible to everyone. Isn't that what a hospital should do? Cure people, not get rich at the expense of others suffering." Sarah smiled, proud. "You're right, Michael, but the board, will they approve this?" "They will have to approve," replied Michael with determination, "because if they don't, I resign." The next weeks were a whirlwind of activities. Michael led marathon meetings with the board, passionately arguing for his vision of a hospital truly dedicated to the common good. Richard Anderson, who observed his son with a mixture of pride and concern, finally spoke during a particularly tense meeting. "Gentlemen, when my father founded this hospital, he had a dream of a place where health wouldn't be a privilege, but a right. Over the years, perhaps we've strayed a bit from that ideal, but today, my son reminds us of the true purpose of St. Vincent. I support him fully." With Richard's support and growing public pressure, Lucy's story had gone viral, inspiring millions. The board finally agreed with Michael's plan. A press conference was called. Before cameras and journalists from around the world, Michael announced St. Vincent Hospital's decision. "Today, we're not just announcing a medical breakthrough. We're redefining what it means to be a hospital in the 21st century. The treatment we've developed for lupus, as well as all future discoveries from our research center, will be shared openly with the world, because we believe that health is a fundamental human right, not a commodity." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Messages of support flooded social media. Other hospitals and research institutions committed to follow St. Vincent's example, and even governments began to rethink their health policies. That night, exhausted but satisfied, Michael found Helen in the hospital garden. "You've changed everything," she said softly. "When you helped me that day, I never imagined it would come to this." Michael smiled, looking at the stars. "It wasn't me, Helen. It was all of us. Every person in this hospital, every patient, every employee, everyone contributed to this change." Helen took Michael's hand, surprising him. "You know, I think I fell in love not just with what you did, but with the man you are." Michael felt his heart race. He had always admired Helen, her strength, her dedication. And now he realized his feelings went beyond admiration. As the couple shared a kiss under the starry sky, Michael knew this was just another change in a sea of transformations. St. Vincent Hospital had become more than a place of healing. It was now a beacon of hope for the world, showing that with compassion, dedication, and vision, it was possible to create a truly just and humane healthcare system. And that was a revolution that was just beginning. Winter arrived in the city, covering the streets with a thin layer of snow. At St. Vincent Hospital, the cold outside contrasted with the human warmth emanating from its corridors. A year had passed since the implementation of the revolutionary Employee Assistance Program, and the hospital pulsed with renewed energy. Michael Anderson observed the city through his office window, a steaming cup of coffee in his hands. His reflection in the glass showed a transformed man, more mature, with some grey strands at his temples, but with a gleam in his eyes. That spoke of purpose and fulfillment. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Helen, now not just the dedicated employee who had inspired all this change, but also his partner in life. "Good morning, love," she smiled, approaching for a quick kiss. "Ready for the big day?" Michael nodded, feeling a mixture of anxiety and excitement. "I can hardly believe we've come this far." The big day Helen referred to was the inauguration of the first branch of St. Vincent Hospital in another city. After the success of the assistance program and the worldwide repercussion of the open sharing of research on lupus treatment, the St. Vincent model had become a global case study in humanized hospital management. "Michael," called Sarah, entering the office hurriedly, "the press is already arriving, and the governor called to confirm his presence at the ceremony." He breathed deeply, adjusting his tie. Right, let's go. Helen, are you coming? Helen shook her head with a smile. I have to supervise the final preparations here, but I'll be watching the live broadcast with the entire team in the auditorium. Michael kissed her once more before following Sarah to the hospital's helipad, where a helicopter awaited to take them to the inauguration. During the flight, Michael reflected on the whirlwind of the past year. The decision to openly share the lupus research had generated shockwaves in the medical world. Initially, there was resistance from some pharmaceutical companies and investors who saw millions slipping through their fingers. But public opinion was firmly on St. Vincent's side. The treatment, now known as the St. Vincent Protocol, was being implemented in hospitals around the world, saving countless lives. More importantly, it had inspired a change in mentality in the global medical community. Upon arriving at the new branch, Michael was greeted by an enthusiastic crowd. Employees, patients, authorities, and journalists gathered to see the man who was redefining the concept of healthcare. "Mr. Anderson," shouted a reporter, "how do you feel seeing the St. Vincent model expanding?" Michael smiled, approaching the microphone. "I feel honored and humble. What we see here today isn't the result of one person's work, but of an entire community that believed we could do things differently." The inauguration ceremony was emotional. When Michael cut the ribbon, officially opening the doors of the new unit, he felt tears in his eyes. This wasn't just a new hospital, it was a symbol of hope, a beacon showing that a more just and humane healthcare system was possible. Among the guests, Michael noticed familiar faces. Lucy, now completely recovered and working as a patient rights advocate. Dr. Mitchell, who had become one of the fiercest defenders of the new model, and even some board members who had initially resisted the changes. After the official speeches, Michael made a point of walking through each sector of the new hospital, greeting employees and patients. In each face, he saw the reflection of the impact his decisions had made. At the end of the day, exhausted but deeply satisfied, Michael returned to the original St. Vincent. In the lobby, he was greeted by an explosion of applause. Employees from all departments had gathered to celebrate. Mrs. Zelda, now an almost legendary figure in the hospital, approached with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Michael, when you helped me, that day so long ago, I never imagined it would come to this. You not only saved my life, but you're saving thousands of others." Michael moved, hugged the woman. "Mrs. Zelda, it was you who taught me the true importance of what we do here." Helen approached, intertwining her fingers with Michael's. "I think we have one more surprise for you," she smiled mysteriously. Confused, Michael was guided to the auditorium. There on a large screen he saw a live broadcast from the World Health Organization. "And it is with great honor that we announce the winner of this year's Global Health Innovation Award," said the presenter. "For their revolutionary work in humanized hospital management and the open sharing of crucial medical research, the award goes to St. Vincent Hospital, led by Michael Anderson." The room exploded into applause and shouts of joy. Michael stood, paralyzed, unable to believe what he was hearing. Richard Anderson approached his son, tears in his eyes. "Your grandfather would be so proud, Michael. You haven't just continued his legacy. You've elevated it to heights he could never have imagined." That night, after all the celebrations, Michael and Helen walked hand in hand through the hospital garden. "You know," said Michael, looking at the stars, "when all this began, I just wanted to do the right thing for an employee. I never imagined we'd come so far." Helen smiled, caressing her beloved's face. "And that's why it worked, Michael, because you always cared about people, not numbers." Michael stopped, turning to Helen. "None of this would have been possible without you. You were my inspiration, my strength in difficult moments." He then knelt, taking a small box from his pocket. "Helen Sanders, would you do me the honor of marrying me, of continuing this journey together, not just as partners in work, but in life?" With tears in her eyes, Helen answered with an emotional yes, sealing the moment with a passionate kiss. As the couple celebrated their love with St. Vincent Hospital as a silent witness, Michael knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter. The future was full of possibilities, challenges, and opportunities to continue making a difference in the world. And he was ready to face it all, with Helen by his side, and with the certainty that, when one acts with compassion and determination, it's possible to transform not just a hospital, but an entire healthcare system, one heart at a time. Spring had arrived, bringing with it not just the rebirth of nature, but also new challenges and opportunities for St. Vincent Hospital. 2 years had passed since the implementation of the revolutionary Employee Assistance Program, and the impact of the changes led by Michael Anderson had spread far beyond the hospital walls. Michael and Helen, now married for 6 months, walked, hand in hand through St. Vincent's corridors, greeting employees and patients. The couple radiated an aura of happiness and shared purpose, their personal union reflecting the unifying mission they had brought to the hospital. "Mr. Michael! Mrs. Helen!" called an excited voice. It was Lucy, now fully recovered and working, as coordinator of the support program for patients with autoimmune diseases. "You need to see this." She guided them to a conference room where a live broadcast showed a session of the National Congress. The topic under debate, a proposal for a new health law inspired by the St. Vincent model. And it is based on the extraordinary results achieved by St. Vincent Hospital that we propose the implementation of this model on a national scale, a senator was saying. The right to quality healthcare cannot be a privilege for the few. Michael felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. What had begun as a local initiative was about to become national policy. The implications were enormous. But not everyone in the broadcast seemed enthusiastic. Representatives of large hospital groups and the pharmaceutical industry argued vehemently against the proposal, claiming it was economically unfeasible and harmful to medical innovation. Helen squeezed Michael's hand. "It seems our fight is far from over," she said softly. At that moment, Sarah entered the room hurriedly. "Michael, we have a problem. The press is in the lobby. Information leaked about... Well, you'd better see for yourself." In the main lobby, a crowd of reporters had gathered, cameras and microphones in hand. In the center of the confusion, Michael recognized the face of Carl, one of the oldest employees from the maintenance department. "Mr. Anderson," shouted a reporter as soon as she saw him, "is it true that St. Vincent Hospital denied treatment to an employee?" Michael felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. "What are you talking about?" Carl stepped forward, his expression a mixture of shame and desperation. "I'm sorry, Mr. Michael, I didn't want things to come to this point, but my daughter needs a bone marrow transplant. The program covers the procedure, but we couldn't find a compatible donor. When I asked for help to look for a donor abroad, I was told that wasn't covered." The revelation fell like a bomb. Everything Michael and his team had built over the years seemed to be crumbling before his eyes. "Please, everyone calm down," said Michael, raising his hands. "Let's clarify this situation. Carl, can we talk privately?" As Michael and Carl headed to a private room accompanied by Helen and Dr. Mitchell, the reporters continued their uproar. Sarah and the public relations team did their best to contain the situation. In the meeting room, Carl explained the situation in detail. His 12-year-old daughter had been diagnosed with leukemia, and a bone marrow transplant was her best chance. The hospital program covered the procedure, but after months of searching, no compatible donor was found in the country. "I just wanted to expand the search," said Carl with tears in his eyes. "But they told me looking for international donors wasn't within the scope of the program." Michael felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. They had created a revolutionary program, but there were still gaps, situations they hadn't anticipated. "Carl," said Michael, placing a hand on the employee's shoulder, "I'm sorry you went through this. You should have come to talk to me directly." Dr. Mitchell cleared his throat. "Michael, we have to be careful. If we make an exception, other employees might demand the same. The costs could become unsustainable." Helen, who had remained silent until then, spoke. "But isn't that exactly why we're here? To help when it matters most?" Michael was silent for a moment, pondering. Finally, he stood up. "Dr. Mitchell, I want you to personally lead the search for a donor for Carl's daughter, including international registries. Helen, please call an emergency board meeting. And Carl," he turned to the employee, "I promise you, We'll do everything in our power to help your daughter." In the hours that followed, St. Vincent Hospital entered a frenzy of activity. While the medical team initiated a global search for a compatible donor, Michael led a tense meeting with the board. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "what happened today exposed a flaw in our system, but it also gave us the opportunity to do even better." Michael proposed the creation of a special fund for exceptional cases, which would allow the hospital to go beyond the normal scope of the program when lives were at stake. He also suggested partnerships with international donor registries and other hospitals around the world. The discussion was heated. Some board members feared this could open the doors to abuses and uncontrolled costs. Others argued that it was the natural evolution of the hospital's commitment to humanized care. After hours of debate, Michael's proposal was approved, although with some modifications and additional safeguards. Meanwhile, in the hospital lobby, Carl's story had touched hearts. Employees, patients, and even some of the reporters who had come to cover the scandal offered to take the compatibility test for bone marrow donation. As night fell, exhausted but determined, Michael found Helen in the hospital garden. "How are you?" she asked softly, offering a cup of tea. Michael sighed, accepting the drink. "Honestly, shaken. I thought we had solved all the problems, that our model was perfect, but today was a reminder that there will always be new challenges." Helen smiled, caressing her husband's face. "And that's why what we do is so important, because we're willing to face these challenges to keep improving." At that moment, Sarah appeared running. "Michael, Helen, you won't believe it." "What is it?" they asked in unison. Sarah, breathless but smiling, replied, "We found a compatible donor for Carl's daughter. It's a doctor in Germany who heard about the story on social media and offered to help." The news was like a ray of hope cutting through the darkness. Michael hugged Helen, tears of relief and joy in his eyes. "See," said Helen softly, "that's why we do what we do. Because every life matters, every story deserves a happy ending." As the couple observed the night sky, studded with stars, Michael knew this was just another chapter in St. Vincent Hospital's journey. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But with Helen by his side, and with a team dedicated to making a difference, he was ready to face anything the future might bring. St. Vincent Hospital wasn't just a place of physical healing. It was a beacon of hope, compassion, and constant innovation. And as long as there was a life to save, a story to change, they would continue fighting, evolving, and above all, caring. 5 years had passed since that tense night in the garden of St. Vincent Hospital, when the news of a compatible donor for Carl's daughter brought relief and renewed determination. Time had brought changes, challenges, and above all, growth. Michael Anderson, now with some grey hair at his temples, walked through the corridors of the hospital that had become much more than a workplace. It was the beating heart of a healthcare revolution. "Good morning, Mr. Michael," greeted a young nurse. Her badge indicated she was part of the international exchange program that St. Vincent had established, bringing healthcare professionals from around the world to learn and share knowledge. Michael smiled, remembering how this program had been born from the crisis they faced years ago. What had begun as a desperate search for a bone marrow donor had transformed into a global network of medical cooperation. Upon reaching the hospital's new auditorium, Michael was greeted by a sight that filled his heart with pride and emotion. The space was packed with familiar and new faces, all gathered for a special occasion. Helen, now director of the Employee Assistance Program and 7 months pregnant with the couple's first child, came to meet him. "Ready?" she asked, intertwining her fingers with his. Michael nodded, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. Together, they climbed onto the stage, where they were received with warm applause. "Welcome, everyone," began Michael, his voice echoing through the auditorium. "Today, we're not just celebrating the 5th anniversary of our program's expansion. We're celebrating every life touched, every obstacle overcome, and every lesson learned along the way." He paused, his eyes scanning the audience. He saw Lucy, now an internationally renowned lawyer in patient rights. Carl was there too, alongside his daughter, now a healthy and vibrant teenager. Dr. Mitchell, Sarah, Mrs. Zelda, each face told a story of transformation. "When we began this journey," continued Michael, "we had a simple dream: to ensure that every employee of this hospital had access to dignified healthcare. But you, each one of you, showed us that we could dream even bigger." Helen took the floor. "Today, the St. Vincent model isn't just an assistance program. It's a philosophy of care that has spread to hospitals across the country and beyond. It's a collaborative research network that's breaking barriers in medicine. It's living proof that when we put people first, we all rise." The screen behind them lit up, showing images of hospitals around the world that had adopted the St. Vincent model. From a small rural clinic in Africa to a large medical center in Tokyo, the impact was visible and exciting. "But our journey is far from over," said Michael. "Each day brings new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference, and that's why today I'm pleased to announce the launch of the St. Vincent Foundation." A murmur of excitement ran through the auditorium. "This foundation," explained Helen, "will be dedicated to expanding our care model to underserved communities around the world. We'll provide resources, training, and support for hospitals and clinics that wish to implement a more humane and accessible approach to healthcare." Michael continued, "Additionally, the foundation will fund innovative research in medical treatments, with the condition that all results be shared openly with the global community." The audience erupted into enthusiastic applause. It was more than they could have imagined when it all began. At that moment, to everyone's surprise, Richard Anderson, Michael's father, climbed onto the stage. The man, now older but with eyes shining with pride, took the microphone. "Many years ago," he began, his voice choked with emotion, "my father founded this hospital with the dream of creating a place where people could find healing and hope. Over the years, perhaps we strayed a bit from that dream. But my son—" He paused, looking at Michael with tears in his eyes. "My son not only rescued that dream, he expanded it beyond anything we could have imagined." Richard then announced that he was donating a substantial amount to the new foundation, challenging other business leaders to do the same. The ceremony continued with emotional testimonials from patients, employees, and international partners. Each story was a testament to the profound impact that a simple idea, treating people with dignity and compassion, could have. At the end of the event, Michael and Helen walked hand in hand through the hospital garden, the same place where, years ago, they had received the news that changed everything. "Did you ever imagine we would come this far?" asked Helen, caressing her prominent belly. Michael smiled, placing his hand over hers. "Honestly, no. But that's what happens when you allow yourself to dream and have incredible people by your side to transform those dreams into reality." They stopped, observing the sunset that painted the sky with shades of orange and pink. St. Vincent Hospital stood majestic against this backdrop, no longer just a building but a symbol of hope and change. "You know," said Michael, "when I think about our son or daughter who's arriving, I feel a mixture of hope and responsibility. What world are we leaving for them?" Helen smiled, resting her head on her husband's shoulder. "A world a little better than the one we found, I think. A world where people are rediscovering the value of compassion and collaboration." At that moment, as if responding to its parents, the baby gave a vigorous kick. Michael and Helen laughed, feeling the promise of the future literally moving between them. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" asked Michael, his gaze sweeping the city's horizon. "Yes," replied Helen, her voice full of conviction. "And what an incredible journey we have ahead." As the couple walked back to the hospital, ready to face any challenge the future might bring, the legacy of St. Vincent Hospital continued to grow and spread. It was a legacy of hope, of healing, and of the unwavering belief that when people unite for a greater cause, there is no limit to the good they can do. And so what began as a simple act of kindness on an ordinary day had transformed into a wave of change that would continue to touch lives for generations to come. St. Vincent Hospital was no longer just a place. It was a movement, a philosophy, a beacon of hope shining for the world. Dear listeners, we hope that the journey of Michael, Helen, and everyone at St. Vincent Hospital has touched your hearts. This story reminds us that each of us has the power to make a difference, that small acts of kindness can trigger monumental changes. If you felt inspired by this narrative, don't keep that feeling to yourself. Share it with friends and family. Leave a comment telling how this story resonated with you or what changes it inspired you to make in your own life or community. To continue this journey of inspiration and reflection, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. You can find it by clicking on the link to your left. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Your interaction helps us continue bringing content that not only entertains but also inspires and provokes important reflections. Every day we bring new stories that explore the complexity and beauty of the human experience. Don't miss our upcoming content. After all, each story has the power to change a life, and who knows, the next transformed life might be yours. We thank you for accompanying us on this exciting journey. Until the next story.